Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to James Cook University in the Singapore campus. Tonight we are very excited to be having a very stimulating conversation and discussion about sustainable food. And before we get going with our program, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dale Anderson, who will welcome and introduce the evening.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And my job is very simple. I just want to welcome you all here tonight. Welcome you to James Cook University, Singapore, which of course is a very proud part of James Cook University, Australia. Thank you for joining us here tonight, and there's many of our friends and people we don't know, so hopefully after the end of tonight you'll all be our friends. I'm pleased to hear that we have attendees from more than 35 organisations here this evening. The event commemorates International Day of the Tropics, which was declared by the United Nations General Assembly in New York in 2016. This day is celebrated every year on the 29th of June, which is the anniversary of the launch of the inaugural State of the Tropics 2014 report. That report, of course, was launched by Aung San Suu Kyi in Burma in conjunction with our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Sandra Harding. It was a really great event, and we commemorate that every year on the 29th. The report was a result of the State of the Tropics project, which was convened by James Cook University and drew on the expertise of leading institutions from around the world. International Day of the Tropics highlights the significant challenges and opportunities faced by the nations of the tropics and the global implications of the rapid changes that the regions are experiencing. Now, food is an important part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Food's very important everywhere. We have lined up tonight experts from James Cook University and other institutions and organisations to consider aspects of food security and sustainable food supply in a global and Singapore context. I would like to extend my appreciation and thanks to the panel for sharing their thoughts this evening with us. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the people who organised tonight, so thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, and I hope you really enjoy the night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So, before we get going with the program, I want to tell you a little bit about what is going to happen tonight. So we have each of our 8 panellists who will speak for 5 minutes each. So I will give them a warning indication at 4 minutes and at 4.5, and they will get a red card, and my alarm will go off on my phone at 5 minutes. So you may all like to log in to Slido or download the app, because we will use this app for asking questions. So as we go through the presentations, you can put your questions in through this app. So you download the app, there's Wi-Fi access up there. You download Slido, the event code is up on the screen as well. So we'll put that back up for you every now and then through the evening. And you will have an opportunity to put your questions in, and then we will even vote. If we get lots of questions, we'll vote on which questions we want to ask the panel. So panel members, also be mindful that you can have an opportunity to ask another panel member a question as well early on. So to introduce our panel members this evening, we have Professor Ian Gordon. So he is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the Tropical Environments and Societies of James Cook University. He joined James Cook University in 2015, and he is passionate and committed to sustainable regional development and harnessing the tropics' enormous potential through education and research. Prior to his current role, he was the CEO and Director of the James Hutton Institute, the largest research institute in the UK, specialising in agriculture, environment and rural development. He has recently published a book on food production and nature conservation, conflicts and solutions. So we look forward to hearing from Ian. We have via Zoom Professor Stewart Lucky, so he will be coming to speak to us from the big screen, and he's listening to us now. So Stewart is currently in Cairns in northern Queensland. Professor Lucky received a PhD in sociology from Charles Sturt University in 1997. The focus of this research, the evolution and impacts of environmental policy in agriculture, has since been extended to studies of biodiversity conservation, environmental standards, markets in ecosystem services, food security, coastal management, resource development, management of natural and industrial hazards, among many other things. So he has published well over 100 peer-reviewed books, journal articles and book chapters, and was acknowledged for his work in 2012 in his election to the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia. So he has a strong leadership role in the university, and he will be contributing some interesting conversations about the sustainability goals from the UN. We also have with us today Professor Ng-Hao Yong. He is a Deputy Head of Administration of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the National University of Singapore. He is also the Director of the SEMCorp NUS Corporate Laboratory, funded by the National Research Foundation and SEMCorp Industries Limited. His research focuses on biological treatment processes, membrane bioreactor and environmental sustainability through resource recovery. So he's part of a program of very clever technologies, and he's also part of an initiative called the Safe Water Gardens Project. Next to Professor Ng, we have Professor Dean Jerry. Professor Dean Jerry is our Dean of Research here at James Cook University in Singapore, and he is also the Director of the ARC Research Hub for Advanced Prawn Breeding, that's shrimp breeding, and the Deputy Director of the JCU Centre for Sustainable Tropical Fisheries and Aquaculture, based in Australia. His primary area of research focus and expertise is in the application of genetic technologies to improve farmed aquatic organisms, and he's worked with aquaculture species for more than 17 years. Has an internationally recognised research team in aquaculture genetics and has been instrumental in the development of genetic tools and knowledge to inform commercial selective breeding programs for a number of tropical aquaculture species. Then we have Dr. George Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs is President of the Vegetarian Society of Singapore. He is also one of our team on the Student Support Services here at James Cook University and works very closely with our students here. So he's the volunteer president of the Vegetarian Society. He's a frequent guest at events where he explains the health, environment and kindness benefits of plant-based diets. He has authored many books, articles and forum page letters on these topics, and in addition to his own writing, George enjoys the teaching of academic writing here on campus. We have Dr. Penji Wang, also from James Cook University. She's a senior lecturer in business. Dr. Wang is received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Management and MA in Industrial Economics from Nankai University in China. She is currently pursuing her PhD. Oh, has her PhD. Done. Finished. Moved on. So she has a very active research program in several business areas, including in food waste management. So we're really looking forward to Penji's contribution this evening. We have Ms. Pui Cuifen. So she's a senior environmental scientist at DHI and also co-founder of Foodscape Collective in Singapore. She's an environmental scientist, and Cuifen's interest is in food sustainability, and it was sparked during her gap year in Australia. She found farmer markets, knowing your farmer, eating local, farm to table, growing food with neighbours really eye-opening, and that inspired her to continue that activity through Youth Encounter with sustainability courses. So Cuifen went on to create an edible garden with neighbours. She also co-founded Foodscape Collective, a network of people in Singapore who care about food issues in our foodscapes and take on responsibility of building more sustainable food systems that nourish the environment and or people through conscious choices and the actions that we make. And last but definitely not least, we have Mr. Darren Howe, who is head of Citizen Farm, Edible Garden City in Singapore. So this is Singapore's first and only closed-loop urban farm. After he completed his studies in economics and natural resource management at the University of Western Australia, Darren gained a wealth of industry exposure through work stints in various farms around the world. Over the course of a decade in agriculture, Darren has been featured in local and international news for his role in leading the sustainability and urban farming cause here in Singapore. So as part of the leadership team at Edible Garden City and a champion for the Grow Local, Eat Local movement, Darren is driven to scale up urban farming in Singapore and to share the benefits of agriculture and horticulture with our community. So we very much look forward to Darren's contribution this evening as well. So that's our panellists. Thank you all very much for being here. So let's get on with the content of this evening. So first up we have Professor Ian Gordon. I won't make any other introduction. I'll hand over the microphone.
So this is the scariest website that there is. This is what's called the population clock, and every time that number ticks, there's an additional person comes into this world. And so you can see that today there's been over 310,000 births and 128,000 deaths. And all that says is that the population, which is currently sitting at just over 5.6 billion, that is expected to grow in the next 30 years to somewhere between 10 and 12 billion. Okay, so we're going to add another 3 to 4 billion people to this planet. Most of those people are going to be born very close to Singapore. Okay, so this is the area of growth. Currently, there's about 3.1 billion people in the tropical region of the world, and that's going to grow to over 5 billion people in the next 20 to 30 years. What does that mean? Basically, that means that in the next 20 to 30 years, we have to produce at least 50 to 70% more food. We're going to be using about 50% more energy. We're going to be using 30% more fresh water, and we currently use 70% of the world's fresh water. Okay, as that's the human use, and we're expecting to have to clear between 120 million and 1 billion hectares of land in the tropics in order to be able to grow that food. To give some idea about what that means, we're going to have to grow in the next 50 years the same amount of food as was grown over the past 10,000 years of agriculture. Okay, so these are all scary statistics that talk about what the issues about food security are. There's also issues around the growing wealth of people, particularly in the Asian and Southeast Asian region. So currently, the middle-income countries, the gross domestic product has grown by about 180% over the past 10 years. What does that mean for food security? That means two things. One is people are eating more, and also people are converting from eating a grain-based diet to eating a meat-based diet. So as poor people tend not to eat much meat, it's too expensive. As people's income increase, they go for a more Western diet, and that includes much more meat. And so what does that mean? Currently, about 25% of the world's surface area is used for grazing land for livestock. There's about 360 million cattle in the world and about 600 million sheep and goats. And obviously, I'm going to talk a bit about what the increase in meat consumption is going to be. 25%, another 25% of the area of the globe is now covered in land for cultivating crops. So about 50% of the world's surface area, that's not including the sea, and Dean's going to talk more about that, 50% of the world's surface area is used to grow food. Currently, we're expecting in the next 20 years to be increasing crop production by about 45% and increasing meat production by about 125%. Okay, so these are all figures, but the reality is that means we're going to have to find ways of feeding a growing population. Otherwise, there's going to be issues around starvation, there's going to be issues around civil strife, as we already see in many different places. Sorry, I'm just waiting. Also, in this region, where most of that growth in food production is going to have to happen, is one of the most biodiverse parts of the planet. 80% of the planet's terrestrial biodiversity and 95% of the coral reefs and mangrove forests are in this region, and 63% of the world's remaining forests. These are all big challenging things, and I'm hoping that this will spark a conversation. But for me, a way for us to be able to deal with this in the future is to reconnect agriculture and nature. Instead of having agriculture and nature competing with each other, it's about bringing them together in order for them to be able, for nature to be able to provide services, what are called ecosystem services, to agriculture. In China at the moment, orchards are hand pollinated because previous use of pesticides has killed all the insects. We need to bring back those insects in order to be able to pollinate. There's a whole range of different things that nature can do for food production, which means that we can both feed the world and save the planet at the same time. Thank you. Is that 5 minutes?
Outstanding, outstanding. It's 5 seconds under 5 minutes.
Sorry. And that's my book.
So our next speaker is Professor Stewart Lucky, who is coming to us from Cairns on the big screen.
Thanks, Jennifer, and good evening to everybody in Singapore. Thanks for putting up with the remote connection. Let me start from deviating from my notes. Look, it's tempting to look at that slide that Professor Gordon put up to see the population clock ticking and to jump to the conclusion. This was not the conclusion that Ian drew, but it's tempting to jump to the conclusion that people are a big problem. And as a sociologist, I'm going to revert to type and say people are not the problem, but inequality among people is a huge problem. So that's the little sociology lecture. Let me get on to the topic I was asked to talk about, the role of the Sustainable Development Goals in delivering food. Now, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that entered into force in 2016, in a sense, gives us a very easy answer as to the role of the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2030 Agenda is an agreement between most of the world's governments that commits those governments to voluntary reporting and monitoring of a range of goals and targets, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 associated targets. And so there's a degree of mutual accountability there. It's not an agreement that has legal force, but there's a high-level political forum every 12 months in the UN headquarters in New York, at which governments are highly motivated to turn up and tell good news stories. So there's an inbuilt mechanism in there to promote meaningful adoption of the goals. The second goal, SDG 2, to end hunger, is the one that's most directly relevant. It stresses ending hunger, achieving food security, improving nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture. So there's a clear link there between food provisioning, the adequacy and the nutrition of food provisioning, and the way in which we produce food. If you dig down into the targets, it's also interesting to note, I won't go through all the targets, but it's interesting to note that there's a clear intention there to link hunger and the provision of food with other social and economic issues. Amongst the targets is the doubling of agricultural productivity, something that, as Ian has noted, needs to be done with care. But that's a double-barreled target. It also includes the target of doubling the incomes of small-scale producers. So there's a clear connection from that target back to the first Sustainable Development Goal of ending poverty. So there's this high degree of integration. Now, one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting when the 2030 Agenda was drafted was the addition of one concept Sustainable development, ever since the idea has been hanging around in the late 80s, has always been about integrating social, economic and environmental goals. So nothing new there about language like integration and universality. But another word was introduced, indivisibility, which it seems like a pretty typical UN word. It's pretty klutzy, it's hard to say, but it's there for an important political reason. And the reason is that everybody jumped on board, it seemed, with the idea of sustainable development when it hit in the 1980s. But it very quickly became an idea that got pushed in one of three directions. And we ended up with the mostly economic version of sustainability. The version that said, once we've got economic growth ticking along, we'll be able to afford conservation. We'll be able to afford social welfare. And to a lesser extent, we had the mostly environmental view, which is pretty popular at James Cook University, I should add. You know, we're big on fortress conservation at James Cook. It's once that we've protected all the biodiversity and we've put fences around around everything we want to protect, we can use what's left for jobs and for food production. I don't know that we ever had a mostly social version. This language of indivisibility is about stressing that you can't pursue one aspect and not the others. There's no such thing. I can't see you, Jennifer. In fact, who said that?
It's all right, we'll switch you off.
So bringing that back is really important. Now, in dealing with that issue of indivisibility in relation to food, the one other point I want to make was to link this back to the primary mechanism we use to regulate food through the whole food value chain, and that's food standards. Food standards imposed by governments and food standards imposed by lead firms within value chains. Now, those standards often talk a big game on sustainability, but in the vast majority of cases, they're about cosmetic quality issues and food safety issues and the protection of profits for lead firms and the avoidance of economic risk. So with more time, I'd give you some examples, but in general, these sorts of standards are very weak on environment and very weak on the social.
Thanks so much, Stewart. Our next speaker is Professor Ng from NUS.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk about a topic that is related to food sustainability, but at the same time, trying to solve pressing environmental sustainable issues. Can I have the... Oh, okay. All right, so we have been embarking on this project called Safe Water Gardens. And it's a solution for rural developing countries like our neighbor Bintan, Indonesia. And it's not really relevant to Singapore because we live in an urban developed society and we have very good infrastructure. But just 45 minutes an hour or 2 hours away from us, you find that it is a completely different world. So we are trying to look at a sustainable solution that solve the environmental pollution problem and at the same time increase food security for the people. So a bit of statistic is that this is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6, stated that in 2030 everyone should have access to clean drinking water and hygiene sanitation. And this has a huge impact on other goals like 1, 2, 3, 14 and 15. Now, but we know that a lot of places in the world are facing bad sanitation, and we know that bad sanitation caused pollution of drinking water. So in the old days, people, when they talk about providing good drinking water, the United Nations will say, okay, just purify the water. But the focus has changed over the years, where they try to provide good sanitation and you prevent the pollution source so that you can have good, safe drinking waters. So in Indonesia alone, you find that 370 kids die every day. So this is really alarming, all right? Okay, so, and the other major issue here is that if you got wastewater or discharge from human, you find that if you don't treat it, it enter into the water systems and you cause environmental pollution. And once in a while you hear about algae bloom or fishes dying along the Straits of Malacca, all right, Strait of Malaysia, and that is all related to your nutrient that end up in the marine water and death of aquatic life. So bad sanitation has also a very huge impact on human dignity and self-worth. All right, and a lot of these developing places, people try to move to bigger cities because they have better opportunity, better living conditions. All right, and another amazing thing is that normally we think that Singapore water is expensive, but if you go to Indonesia, you find that most of the household, they don't drink water from the well. Either they take the water, if they can't afford bottled water, they will then take the water from the well and boil it and drink. Other than that, you find that the consumption of bottled water is amazing. And what is the other consequences? The production of plastic waste, bottles, all right? And you find that in Indonesia, Bintan alone, they make 20 times less money, but yet they pay 20 times more for drinking water, all right? So what is our proposed solution? And we couldn't provide a solution that cover about wastewater, drinking water. We are trying to solve the problem of health problems, all right? So this system, what we have been working on is basically based on the UNICEF system, UNESCO, that was developed in after the Aceh tsunami. Because during the Aceh tsunami, you find that the sanitation is a big issue. So a group of expert people come together and develop a manual for solution, a cheap cost solution. And we base that model and try to optimize it and make it better, all right? So the idea here is this: we have a septic systems, all right? Septic system, then from there you got treatment of the waste and there's an overflow and go down to a leach field. And that's where you can plant your banana, your chili, every kind of stuff. And this plant will extract the nutrient for this discharge system. And the benefit here is that you don't have open desiccation. You don't have wastewater lying around where kids roaming around. So in the old days, the Indonesians are very worried about the kids going out to play because they may be touching all this water and then indirectly consuming and get sick, all right? So after we implemented this garden, all the moms are much more comfortable letting the kids running around. And this solution solved the health problem and also at the same time odor smell problem, and also at the same time provide a nutrient for the food system. All right, and we have these Save Water Gardens. So it is an initiative that is involved by multiple parties, including this Business Council for Sustainable Development Singapore, TUE, and Hoven University of Technology, NUS, and so and so. All right, with this, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ng. Very inspiring work and close by. So next up we have Professor Dean Jerry.
Thank you and good evening. I want to engage the audience. Who here likes seafood? Put your hand up. Come on, be truthful, because Singapore actually has one of the highest consumptions of seafood per capita on the planet. So my presentation is about how we supply that seafood demand. So we can feed the world sustainably just by adding water. So as Professor Gordon mentioned, there's this paradox that we are seeing at the moment related to developing world, where we see this dramatic increase in people becoming wealthier, particularly in tropical regions of the planet, And as you can see, as they become more affluent, there's a real shift in diet away from plant-based diets towards more the use of animal protein in the diet. The paradox here is that the population is increasing, there's this increased demand for animal protein, there's these sort of figures at the moment in terms of production of land-based animal protein source, beef, mutton, pork, chicken. And you can see, again, as highlighted by Professor Gordon, the real challenge that humanity will face to produce animal protein in 2050 in these current animal production models. Now, seafood has been a very important part of the human diet for all our history since we left Africa, perhaps. But what we are seeing is that we cannot get any more fish from the ocean than what we are currently obtaining. And in fact, to meet our current demand, because many fisheries are already over-exploited, we are having to go deeper into the ocean to find that seafood. And we're also having to go further down the food chain to supply our seafood protein. So this is where aquaculture as an industry is really leading the way in tackling this issue around supplying animal protein sustainably into the future. Now, you might not know what aquaculture is, but aquaculture is effectively the opposite of agriculture, in that agriculture is around the land, whereas aquaculture is about using water to culture our animal protein and some plant protein sources. Aquaculture can be things from fish to crayfish to oysters to even crocodiles and frogs, seaweed, and things like seahorses can all be produced through aquaculture. Aquaculture, however, is probably one of the youngest food production industries on the planet at an industrial scale. And in fact, we say that aquaculture was born about 1970s. And since that time, it has grown dramatically over the last 40 to 50 years to now half of the seafood eaten on this planet is farmed. And this production will continue to grow into the future. But the point is about sustainability. And if we are going to have to produce more animal-based protein to feed the growing human population, it has to be sustainable. And aquaculture, actually, and the farming of aquaculture animals are the most efficient animal production sector. For instance, if we look at the amount of food that an animal eats and then turns it into animal protein, to produce 1 kilogram of beef, they have to consume about 8 kilograms of food. Lamb, it's about 5, where to produce 1 kilogram of shrimp or a salmon, we only have to feed it 1.2 kilograms of food. Aquaculture animals convert animal protein into animal protein more effectively than any of the other livestock-based industries. We use water more efficiently. So to produce 1 kilogram of beef, it takes something like 15,000 litres of water, where to produce 1 kilogram of Asian sea bass or barramundi, we're talking about 450 litres. And it's counterintuitive because we farm these animals in water, but we can farm them in water at extremely high densities. They also produce less nutrients than many of our land-based industries. So in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus production, we are a lot more efficient. I am going to take the liberty of 1 minute more.
He's my boss.
Dale, step in.
The message is here that you've all heard it before. If you give somebody a fish, they can eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they can feed themselves. I have a new saying: if you teach them to farm fish, they can feed the world animal protein globally and sustainably forever. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dean. So now we have George Jacobs.
Let me start by thanking all of you for coming and thanking Hidayah and Vinay for setting everything up. And I also want to say, isn't it great that at universities you can have people with different opinions who can respectfully air those opinions and discuss them?
How do you mean it?
Okay, so my talk has 3 parts. First, I'm going to talk about reasons for a plant-based diet. Then I'm going to talk about specifically how plant-based diets fit with the UN Sustainability Development Goals. And then I'm going to talk about a new question that I get. People are always asking me, how do you get your protein? How do you get your calcium, etc.? But this is a new question. 3 reasons for plant-based diets. Firstly, they're greener. As Dean pointed out, it's very inefficient to produce meat, especially land-based meat. We have to feed the animals many kgs of plant food to get just 1 kg of animal food. And the carbon and the water footprints of animal foods are much higher than for plant foods. Secondly, it's healthier if we eat plant-based diets. The risk of chronic diseases such as diabetes and heart diseases go up greatly when we have an animal-based diet. And then thirdly, plant-based diets are kinder. Our fellow animals have a right to live. If we don't need to incarcerate them and kill them, if we can be perfectly healthy, we can be greener, well, why not do it? So just some of the UN sustainability goals that plant-based diets fit with are, first, hunger. We talked about the inefficiency of animal-based foods. That means we're taking foods away from the hundreds of millions of people who are going without when we eat meat. Health, that's goal number 3. We can reduce our risk of various diseases, like I mentioned, diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers, obesity, many diseases if we go with a plant-based diet. Clean water, remember the water footprint of animal-based diets is much higher than plant-based diets. Climate action, the estimates vary greatly, but somewhere between 14% to 51% of human-produced greenhouse gases are attributed to animal agriculture. And goal 16, peace and justice. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Dr. Martin Luther King, said, "The arc of history is long and jagged, but bends toward justice." So we've pretty much ended slavery. Women have much more rights than they used to have. Most people can vote. And in Singapore, we're extending that to animals, like laws against abuse of animals, or ending shark's fin, because shark's fin soup used to be must-have for wedding dinners, for any kind of high-end. But now, people talk about celebrating without shark's fin. Now, a new question that I get is, what about high-tech meat? There's basically 2 kinds of high-tech meat. One is made from plants. The other is meat made from, you take a cell from a chicken, and you can make chicken meat, no harm at all to any animals. And we see that happening. For example, at NUS, there's a startup called Life3 Biotech, which is producing plant-based meat. They're starting a production facility. They want to go, right, they want to have their foods on the market by the beginning of next year. And for fishes too. There's the plant-based fish meat, and there's even a company called Finless Foods that is trying to take a cell from fishes and produce fish. So in conclusion, we can be greener, kinder, and reduce our risk of chronic disease with a plant-based diet. So then, isn't it just a matter of adjusting our taste buds? And with more and more tasty plant-based foods available, we barely even need to adjust our taste buds. We can go plant-based easily. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Peng Ji. So, what I'm going to talk about today is about this. You look at the image, you find this is wasted food. Okay, if you take a look at the food outside, probably we can find some. So, wasted food. Okay. What is wasted food? I don't need to explain too much, but put it simply, it is the discarded food for any purposes. It's probably because it is spoiled, or it's probably because we have forgotten, or it's probably because we just don't like it. Okay, any reason. Okay, why wasted food or food waste is related to sustainability? Okay, so just now our colleagues have shown astonishing numbers, so here I'm going to continue. Yeah. So look at this. If you take a look at how many people are in hunger, 815 million people in hunger in 2016. And they need food. But is it because there's not enough food around the world? No. There is a lot of food, but the food is not going to them. Okay? And then, why food waste is related to sustainability? It's also, say, if we take food waste as a nation, okay, we can find actually the food waste is probably the third largest contributor of the greenhouse gas emission. Okay, so it produces a lot of this greenhouse gas, like the carbon dioxide and the method. Like during all of these process, like when we when we produce the food, grow the food, manufacture the food, process the food, and then cook the food. And in the end, even when we decompose the food waste, we're still producing all of those greenhouse gas. And given all of these facts, we find nearly 1/3 of all food produced around the world is actually thrown out. It is lost, okay, becoming the food waste. And how much is that? Okay, we can just take a look at the next several number. Actually, this thrown out food is enough to feed 2 billion people. Okay, with this food, if they are distributed to the right people, we don't have this hunger issue. And of course, if you take a look at this supply chain, we will find a lot of parties would be responsible of this food waste. It could be about the farmer, it could be about the food manufacturer, food processor, retailers, or distributor. Okay, but according to the research done by FAO, we know that the household are actually responsible for around half of all the food waste. Okay, household, who are they? All of us. Okay, so maybe this session will become our self-reflection session. Okay. So recently, some of my colleagues and I, we are together doing such a research about the food waste in 3 countries: Singapore, Australia, and United Kingdom. So here I'm just sharing some of our very simple finding. Okay, so from the survey we have done, around 300 respondents in each country, okay, we find out actually most of people, we feel bad if we're talking about we're going to throw out food. Do you feel the same? Probably, right? However, people still throw out food. Okay, so these are the numbers you can see. So Singaporeans, they're throwing 22% of their food, Australian 28%, and UK 22%. Why? Or how much is that? Okay, so if you talk about Singapore, it's something like every week, our family is throwing out 1 bag of rice. Okay, then why do we throw out food? Do you want to do that? We don't. So from what we have found out, we found there are mainly 3 categories of reasons. The first reason, many people feel I am not responsible for all of these food waste because, see, 4 in 10, 10 people, they don't think the household is the main source of the food waste. It's probably the supermarket. It's probably the wholesaler. It's probably the hotel, the restaurants, not me. And then 5 in 10 don't think individuals' effort matters for reducing food waste. Even I try my best, restaurants, they're throwing so much. Then why do I bother to do so? And then the second big categories of reason would be, I didn't notice why I throw food. Okay, so you find that 5 in 10, they don't do the plan for their shopping or for their cooking. Okay, today I go to shopping, I just buy anything at my site. Okay, and then Before I go shopping, I even don't bother to check what I have in my refrigerator. Okay? Oh my God. I'm going to exceed. But let me finish. 1 minute. Okay. And then, of course, yeah. Especially when there's promotion, you probably can find, I'm going to buy a lot. Right? So people also have no idea of what is the difference of use by and best before. Okay? What is the difference? Use by, after that date, it's not safe. Best before, after that date, it still can be used, still can be eaten. Okay? And then the third reason is probably for all of us. So for me, I'm a mother. I want to provide the best food for my kid. Okay? Make sure there's a big variety. It is fresh. Okay? So I have to throw some food if it is not fresh. And then some of us, we think convenience would be very, very important. So I just grab anything if I don't have it. Okay? And then some people will think that what I'm eating represents who I am. So I'm going to eat good things. An ugly apple, I don't want it. I throw it. Okay? So those would be some of the reasons. And of course, this slide, I'm showing some of the existing measures that we can use to deal with this food waste. I don't want to talk too much about it, but you will see from this pyramid, the most important thing would be starting from every one of us. Okay, we can do proper shopping planning, cooking planning. We can check the best before, okay, or the use before, all of those things. Okay, let's start from every one of us. Okay. Sorry, Jennifer.
Hi everyone. Yes, my name is Cuifen, and in my day job, I am an environmental scientist. But when I'm not at work, I think I spend a lot of time being in my community, focusing on, how do I be a more sustainable human? Be it to care for myself, to care for the environment, to care for the people around me. And also, I somehow find myself doing so much stuff with food. It's not something that I learned in school, it's just something that I've learned along the way. So I thought to show this because, we eat every day. In fact, you need to eat at least 3 meals a day, maybe, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For me, I used to eat because, my friends say that that's the cool place to be. The steak is really awesome. That's where my family, we enjoy our dinner. So I'll go to all these places simply because that's the right thing to do. I never really thought much more. But in the recent years, because of all the learnings that I have been having, I find that my food choices have totally changed. A big part of it has been a value change, internal value change, whereby I found that if I continue to eat steak, it maybe is nice, but I could no longer live with myself because internally I'll be like, what the hell is this? I'm telling people to be more sustainable. I believe that this is happening, but I'm doing something else. But at the same time, I'm not yet on a plant-based diet because for me, even as a child, I was already saying, hey, animals do have life, but plants are living things too. In fact, plants probably is more, they don't have a voice. So that's a daily struggle that I have, but I'm kind of choosing my meals right now based on what I feel that I value. So what got me started, I was in Australia and it was my gap year. So I have to do whatever I can do in my gap year because I know when I come back to Singapore, I'll be so busy working. I don't have time to explore and learn. So I signed myself up to go and learn about sustainability. I went to check out all the farmers markets. I went to check out, hey, what's all this about, know your farmer, eating local, etc. They were all totally new concepts to me. But even after I'd taken my course, I was like, oh yeah, very interesting. How does that apply to me? Even as a scientist, for me, I was a biologist. I'd go out to the mangroves and stuff. But to me, I was like, oh yeah, the forest is environment. But I couldn't connect it with when my colleagues say, hey, if you're such an environmentalist, why do you leave your laptop on overnight? It uses energy, And then the scientist in me is like, hello, what does energy got to do with environment? But of course it does. It's just that you know, when we are living the life that we live, somehow we are down this very narrow street and we don't actually see what's beyond. So I was really very appreciative of being in Australia because it helped me to open my eyes. And in particular, I really thank this street. This is a street in Chippendale in Sydney. If you ever go, please go and visit them because it connected the dots for me. Why? It's because I saw how they garden. They didn't just garden. It's an open street. And it's right in front of people's homes. And this is totally like, you know, this is for everyone, it's by everyone. If you need some chili, go ahead, take some. Just remember to leave some for the rest of us. The playground has its own compost bin, the compost heap. And if the compost heap disappears, people like ask, hey, I have food scraps. Where did it go? We need to get this going. And this is really, really awesome. And so that inspired me to come home to Singapore and thinking, how can I bring that? I wasn't very inspired by the community in Bloom Gardens, and I still don't. But I started my own garden with my neighbors because I wanted to learn how to grow. This is my way of being more sustainable. And through that, because I was like going all over the places, you know, I was learning from people because obviously I don't know how to grow anything. I started asking this question, where are all the people like me who just wants to grow something because we care? And so me and my friend Hui, we started Foodscape by simply asking the question, where do people who grow food, where are they? What do they grow? Why? And we started visiting them. And we started having a community. And when we talk about Foodscape, we are not just talking about people who grow. That was our initial question. But we realized in our landscape of food, there are chefs. There are people who wanted to, you know, start a business. There are people who wanted to say, how can I do more if I only know these other people in the landscape of food? So there's many, many other things that I wanted to say, but I wanted to talk a lot about food waste. I have stuff over here that you can bring home, you can take a look, you can feel. And I'm also doing a lot of compost collaborations and stuff. So I think my time is up and I will pass the mic to Darren.
Yep, thank you, Jennifer and Cuifen. My name is Darren, and I am an urban farmer. How the story began was when, I grew up being a regular Singapore kid, just doing finance, trying to make a quick buck, and didn't really work out anyway. So I had an opportunity to go to Cambodia to teach English, and that's where I sort of first had a glimpse of what farming is like in a rural setting. It was a rice farm. I was there to teach English, but I stumbled upon a rice farm, and that was the beginning of everything. So I had a chance to I got enrolled in Australia, and that's where I changed my course and I focused a little bit more on natural resource, on agriculture and land planning and towards that kind of trajectory. But then coming back to Singapore, urban farming is very different. It touches on so many different aspects of life. And now I'm going to share a bit more about what Citizen Farm is all about and what we do. So we call it closed loop because we sort of put together this circular economy principle into our urban farming design. So we looked at a city and what does a city have in abundance, as a few of the speakers here have pointed out, is food waste, right? We're not condoning food waste, but we need food waste for our farm. So food waste, if you think about it, is one of the hardest ways to valorize. It's full of moisture, it's full of nutrients, and yeah, it's meant for our stomach more than anything else in the world. But we have sort of employed the use of an insect called the black soldier fly to break down all these organic waste and turn them into compost as well as animal feed for fishes and chicken and so on. And we have another waste to food kind of farming system is the mushroom farm, where we use coffee grounds that we collect from Marina Bay Sands, and we put them in a substrate that we use to cultivate fungi, and then in turn we get the mushrooms. And then when that substrate bag is just used up of its nutrients, we can then use it as a conditioner for the soil. So everything that we do, we try to keep it. We try to put it back in the loop, right? Like a circle. So that's pretty much what this farm kind of does. And Our farm is a bit different in the sense that we have about we classify our produce in 4 categories. We have leafy greens, microgreens, mushrooms, and edible flowers. So why we do this is obviously from a business standpoint, it diversifies my revenue stream. I'm not relying on just a single source of produce. But more so the fact that because we have that opportunity as an urban farm to connect with the people and to show that, hey, salad is pretty sexy, right? It's not just about your Thousand Island dressing and your iceberg lettuce and some cherry tomatoes. But it's about all these local flavors that all these indigenous species. I mean, here in front of Cuifen, there are a few varieties itself that we can use: the moringa, the blue pea flower, a lot of different type of weeds and sorrels that we can use and put in our salad, and that really accentuates the flavor. So we're trying to bring this to the restaurants as well, and I think this is what sets this farm apart from others. And some of the challenges that we face in a farm, just name 5 out of the many. The first one is obviously a talent pool shortage. I think most of us, the young ones especially, wouldn't have an idea of what being a farmer is like, right? And most of us Singaporeans want to end up becoming a lawyer, a doctor, a scientist, everything but a farmer. That's what I'm getting. Every time I talk to a school, I ask them, raise your hands if you want to be a farmer. They look at me like, what? So you don't really get that sense of people, and this links to the next problem, which is the transfer of knowledge. If there's no one to learn, if no one wants to learn about farming in Singapore, why bother teaching them? So all the farmers are pretty much given up the time, and the previous generation in Kranji and all that, they're done. They're literally done. They're done the time. And then this of course comes from the government, right? The government support. They can do more. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the private sector is always going to lead the race, and of course, everything else will fall in time, and of course, working together with the academic. I think it's a tri-sector plus one, right? The tri-sector being the civil sector, the public sector, the private sector, and then the academics, which are all intertwined in some ways to drive this food sustainability solution and into a better deal. And then, of course, capital investments is always going to be needed in such a high risk kind of an industry. And last but not least, of course, is getting people with the right values to come in. I think Singaporeans, their culture is still, corporate ladder, earning money, and I think the value system needs to be rejigged a little bit. As a farmer, although you don't earn enough money, but you're happier. So I think happiness is one of the biggest things. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Darren. What a range of speakers, and I can see you sending in some really great questions. Keep doing that. Have a look at your Slido app. Vote for a few of the other questions if you want one asked. But before we kick that off, I would like to ask one of the panel members to ask a question for other panel members. So is there anything burning here?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions I've written down, but I'll probably go to Darren. One of the issues is we've managed to make the preparation of food sort of like sexy, as in there's celebrity chef and there's a whole bunch of things around just how the far end of the supply chain is being made sexy. How do we make farming cool apart from just saying, oh, you'll be happier?
I don't know. I actually wonder sometimes why. So I think our farm is quite a interesting situation that I can share. We happen to be the youngest average age farm in Singapore. Literally 90% of our farm are 30 and below, right? So we're inexperienced. That's bad. But there's that passion, right? And I think it's two ways. It's a push and pull factor. In Singapore, I think people are quite sick of the rat race. People are really looking outside because we're a lot more well-traveled. We're a lot more well-informed. We see the world in a different lens now, more than ever. And we're just exposed to a whole repertoire of things that our parents want, right? And I think that sheds a lot of light into how life can be lived, more balanced and less, they call it slow life and all that stuff. But so that's I would say that's a pull factor. sorry, as a push, I just mentioned the push factor. The pull factor, I think, is really connecting with nature. I met one of the professors here. I think her name is Denise. She's somewhere here. She does environmental psychology, and that's something I've been so interested in, and I realized that it's something that really affects the way people look at nature. You know, when I was studying in Australia, I was never exposed to nature the way I was in Singapore, and when I stood in front of something so majestic like the ocean, as simple as the ocean, I just stood there and like, whoa. Right, and I think there's something innate in us that wants us to be connected with nature again. And food is the only way, right? And you talk about the UN Development Goals. I think all of it is solved by one word: food. Good food, right? That's all you need in life, really. And I think that's how we all kind of make it sexy. Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. So, George, question from you.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to ask Cuifen a question about, because we want to make Singapore sustainable, food independent as much as possible. So what about, is that possible for greens and veggies and fruits and things like that? To what extent is that possible? Because some people say, well, all this high-rise gardening is it's not using soil, and we need soil if we're really going to have nutrition.
One of the things I didn't really put in my slides is a few of us, we have a bit of a vision, of a dream, and that's called agri-hoods, or agriculture, not in Kranji, far away, but it's in our neighborhood, whereby it's grown at your homes, in the landscapes around you, everywhere, so that this foodscapes literally is what we live in. At the moment, it's very interesting. Some of my friends, either they are, very permaculture based, they really work with the soil, or some others, they are saying, hey, maybe we have, small beans and palms and whatnot. Let's grow in small spaces without soil, because they want the accessibility, the fast growing, and the nutrition. They focus on the nutrition that might not necessarily come with soil growing. But it's very interesting because some people who responded to the map, they say that, hey, I grow in my HDB corridor and I have so much food to give away because they harvest like 50 kg every week. And then there are some others who say, I have a lot of land, but I don't know how to grow. And that's where I feel that at this point of time, this is the time when people are starting to be very interested, people who are starting to, grow old but they have a lot of experience. Like, how can we really connect people to share that knowledge on how to grow in a way that is nutritious, in a way that really fits our people, in a way that really brings food out to the people around us? I believe there's so much more that we can do. There's so much that people are already growing. And we are also surrounded by things that we might not think is food. I have a lot of stuff over there that you might not think is food, but it's totally edible. And sometimes if we only associate the things that we see in the supermarket as this is what I know how to eat, then we truly limit ourselves. And I think this is the time that we can really explore and learn.
Thank you. That leads me into the first question I want to read from the audience. So thank you very much for all of the questions that are coming in. We've got 25 questions at the moment that we will not get time for all of them. But my first question, I think, will go to Ian, so hopefully that gives you an opportunity to respond to what you wanted to there. So as the population increases, the need for land to accommodate the population will also increase. Yeah. How do we ensure afforestation or growth of nature for farming?
So actually, I'll just make a comment back on some things I've heard that I haven't heard a phrase used here, which I think Singapore is well positioned to do, which is called the circular economy. So the circular economy basically says that nothing is waste. Everything is an input into another system. So when you look at, and you had this to a certain extent, when you look at the output from an agricultural production system, which may appear to be waste, actually it's an input into something else. So you can integrate vegetable production, you can link that in with fish production. That then leads to outputs of water which have higher nutrients, which go back in to feed the vegetable production because they need nutrients. That then feeds down into the fish production, for example, or you can grow the food to feed the fish. So circular economy is something I think which is Singapore is really well positioned to do, because of the fact that you actually have to be incredibly efficient with the way in which you use resources within Singapore. So that, in large part, answers some of the questions around, the question about land. One of the biggest challenges that there is around the growing urban population, so there's more than 50% of the people now live in urbanized areas. The original places where city or towns were are actually right next to good agricultural land. So when cities grow, they grow over the top of a rare commodity, which is agricultural land, right? So you put concrete on the best places to grow agriculture. So that says that we actually have to become much more sensible about the ways in which we use land in cities in order for us to be much more effective at growing the food and delivering it close to, growing it close to where the consumption happens. And then the outputs from that consumption can then get used in for agricultural land. So that to me is one of the keys. But when we talk about reconnecting agriculture and nature, I talk about the fact that originally agriculture was highly dependent on nature because of the fact that famine, floods, pests, diseases all impacted on the amount of food that could be grown. And then we had the Industrial Revolution that basically drove agriculture away from the impact of the environment on agriculture. But the problem was that we used so much input into that new agricultural system, it had a significantly negative impact on the environment. The future 10,000 years requires us to reconnect agriculture and nature and use nature to provide the services to agriculture in order to grow the food that we have sustainably, and as I say, feed the world while saving the planet.
Thank you. So but the next question it's a two-pronged question. I'm combining two questions here. So the audience would like to know the perspective of the panel on GM foods and plants. And there is a related question to that, which I won't mention the company name, but where does the panel stand on big multinational companies that have been involved in GM crops and in fertilizers and in pesticides and all kinds of things? And how do we obligate them to play a protective role rather than exploitative roles? So we're talking about GMs and multinationals and yeah, how do we manage that? What do you think?
Luckily, I'm a geneticist, so I can comment here. So I think I'll go to the second question first about the multinationals. A lot of GM products have arisen by an economic need by companies to solve a problem around production. And so most of the GM foods that we see are maybe a gene put into a crop to make it resistant to a particular pesticide or herbicide that might be sprayed so that the crop doesn't die when you spray the pesticide. What's been missed in the past, however, is the fact that actually GM foods, their real benefit will be if we not focus it so much on production, but we focus it on what the consumer wants. So GM foods get a bit of a bad rap because people think that you're changing a plant or an animal in an adverse way that they can't really connect with what is the benefit to them of that GM product. But what if I said to you, if multinationals started to put into rice, like they are, a gene that allows that rice to produce vitamin D, which actually helps solve one of the world's major health concerns in places like India, where vitamin D deficiency is a major disease. And so GM foods should not be the boogeyman that we think they are. But multinationals have to change their perspective on why they are producing these GM foods and connect more with the consumer benefit of these GM foods. I forget what the first question was, but...
Thank you. I think that's good. But I do want to ask Stewart a question, and also I'd like Stewart to respond as well to the comment about multinationals. But Stewart, How do you determine if a farm production is sustainable, and what are some metrics to look out for?
Okay, well, let me deal with GM. Okay, well, let me deal with GM first. So, a number of years ago, a big multinational, we'll just give it a pseudonym, we'll call it Monsanto. We're getting a bad rap, but I'm not sure if they were the one responsible for the trial. So, the scientists responsible for developing golden rice. So this was rice that was engineered to be more nutritious. Wanted to do some trials, and instead of doing, I mean, maybe they'd done some animal studies first, but anyway, they wanted to do some human trials, and so they gave the rice to some nuns in the Philippines, and the nuns very quickly and unintentionally subverted the experiment because with the money they were saving on rice, they were going and buying more vegetables. And I think it illustrates very nicely the importance of defining your problem, because I would suggest that the problem with nutrition in India isn't that rice doesn't have enough vitamin D, it's that poor people don't have enough dietary diversity and choice. And we see, there's a similar issue with the constant celebration in Queensland of genetically engineering bananas in East Africa to be more nutritious, rather than giving farm plantation workers or banana plantation workers a reasonable income that enables them to go and eat more than secondhand bananas during the day. So solving the social and political issues around food can change the appearance of the problem quite dramatically. And how do you know if a farm is sustainable? I'm quite fond of the criteria that Jules Pretty was publicising quite a while ago, and I know Ian's nodding because the sort of take on sustainable agriculture Pretty advocated was very similar to Ian's promotion of using nature to provide services. The reason I like Pretty's argument is that he gets away from trying to say farms are either sustainable or not sustainable. It's not that straightforward. And he says, look, even the most intensive industrial farms can take meaningful steps towards sustainability. Step one is to become much more efficient in your use of inputs and to reduce leakage into the surrounding environment. Step two is to start incorporating nature and taking advantage of these ecosystem services that Ian's talking about. Step three is to coordinate what you're doing with your neighbours so you get those benefits at a watershed scale, at a regional scale. Step four is to start taking better care of people. Having specific indicators for specific farms is difficult because of the diversity of production systems, but moving along that scale of regeneration, incorporating more ecosystem services and taking care of people is where those indicators need to head.
One question from a lady in the audience who came in late and is not on the app.
Thank you. I have two questions. Actually, I just want to, I know there are too many questions, but pertaining to food. If I come back from Christmas on last year, December, I bought a packet of chocolates and a Hershey, whatever. But because why we don't go to US for so long. So, if the expiry date, if it's end of this year, 1 year, what happens if the chocolates are still good after the expiry date? Do I throw them away? Because I would like to sustain all the chocolates and all the caramel and all that. They still taste very good. The second thing is that because typically in Singapore, we do shopping in cold storage and NTUC is fine. They have all the expiry date and all that. But my mother-in-law and all that would like to go to the wet market and they stock up all the fresh meat and fish during Chinese New Year and all that. Maybe it's too much and they would like to sustain in a refrigerator. How much and how tolerant medically can I sustain those fresh meat and all that for certain that it doesn't cause cancerous or it doesn't cause life and death questions? Because they like to say they don't want to throw away all the fresh meat and fish and all that. in the fridge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who wants to answer this? Food waste, Kenji. Oh my God, this question is... This is about the law. If I tell the wrong answer, I'm gonna... So for the chocolate, is it a... Yeah. And did you take a look at, is it the expiry date or best before? Usually for the chocolate, it is best before.
We don't travel to the US every month.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, usually it will indicate as the best before for chocolate things, because it's not going to be spoiled if you store it properly. Yeah, so still can eat it. For the meat, hard to tell if you put it into the fridge. Actually, it can last quite long. Yeah, it can last quite long. It's just it really depends on whether you do some deodor. You deodor your refrigerator. If there's no such kind of odor issue, no problem.
Cold storage, it's just like the wet buy from wet market.
That's right.
Market is all plastic bags and all.
That's right.
Recycled plastic bags is very probable, but recycled food refrigerated is this acceptable after so long, you know? You can just keep from Chinese New Year all the way to September for the fish.
You're right.
Day,
You're right.
all the good abalone.
That's right.
All that untouched up at the frozen side, and she still does it.
So that is related to another thing that I want to highlight, which is our habit of purchasing. Before we make any purchase, do we check what is in the refrigerator? Yeah, it is, because every one of us, we're doing the same thing. Okay, my mother is also having the same problem. Yeah, so just remind ourselves and our family members, before we make any real purchase, we do need to check the refrigerator. Just let you know that actually there is some kind of technology being developed to put in some monitor into the fridge so that it can remind you what has been there. Yeah, and also...
You can also preserve it in a different way.
I don't know if you've heard of a thing called the microbiome. Have you heard of that? Anyone heard of that? Yes. So the microbiome is the bugs that live in your gut, right? We all have bugs in our gut that are the things that help us digest the food, right? The issue is that we have reduced the diversity of those bugs because of the fact we're not challenging ourselves, right? So when you're a kid, a baby, when I was a little baby, I was always eating dirt, right? When I ate dirt, I got a really diverse gut microbiome, right? Now we tell kids not to eat dirt, right? Oh, we gotta have disinfectants everywhere. Da da da. All that means is your gut is no longer very good at dealing with things that are challenging to it, which like slightly out of date food, right? So I would recommend everyone try and get as a diverse a gut flora as they go.
Yeah.
Go and find that bit of dirt, eat it, and then that's going to help you to deal with the fact that your chocolate may be slightly out of date, but it's not going to kill you.
Okay. I'm going to answer your question on the meat things, okay? So the answer is that you can store for a very long time. The reason why you store in the fridge is that you make sure the bugs don't survive. Food spoil when the bugs are active, they are degrading the food. So that's why if you want to store the meat for a long time, put in the freezer. But if you leave it in the refrigerator, because it's 4 degrees Celsius, there's still some bacteria surviving. So when they survive, they take the food, the organics, as food. So they degrade it, they convert it, then you got smell, you got rotten smell. So you can put it in your fridge and you can keep it for a long time. Then coming to the expiry date, most of the food got expiry date because of the regulation. A lot of food, even you expired, of course you say expired 1 year ago or 10 years ago, you don't eat it, you know. But most of the food put the expiry date because the regulations state that you must put the expiry date. So by eating it, you know whether it's spoiled or not spoiled.
You know if it's coconut.
Yeah, sure. You smell it, you taste it, you know, all right? So the answer to you, the meat you can keep for long, as long as you don't take it out, in and out, in and out. And the other issue here is that, let's say you go to fish market, okay, or prawn market. One good practice is that you keep portion in small bags, so that when you store it, you don't take out the whole thing, defrost it, then you put it back again. When you defrost it, the bacteria start growing, then you go back, they thaw again, so the food will spoil faster. So you split into portion, like today I'm going to cook 1 fish or 10 prawns, you know, you pack in the small pack and you take it out and you defrost, you eat it. The rest you keep it in the fridge. Then you will maintain your food. The worst is that you thaw it, you put it back, you thaw it, no? Then your chances of food spoiling is very high. Now the other second question is that, this is what I saw, you know. Let's say you go to the market, you buy prawns, you know. You thought that the prawns that is laying there, you know, is fresh prawn, you know. Actually, you find that the shop actually take the frozen, defrost it, you know. Then they put it and sell it like a prawn. Then after that, at night can't sell away, they'll keep it, tomorrow take it out again. So if you don't buy live prawn, buy the frozen one. That one is better quality, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question about how can we reverse the trend of meat consumption in Southeast Asia? So we have seen a lot of data about increasing population and also the increasing demand for meat, particularly in Southeast Asia. So I'm going to put this question to Dean first and then to George, because Dean will be able to put a comment on this in terms of the aquaculture production.
I put the question back, why do we need to reduce our meat consumption if we choose a meat that actually has health benefits for us, like fish? So one of the problems with society is loss of cognitive capacity and cardiovascular diseases, which are linked to a lowering of certain fatty acids that we used to get in seafood when we were coastal dwelling communities 10,000 years ago, called omega-3. And so we need to be very careful that if we do start to change our diets dramatically, that we do it in a way by which we don't actually lead to other health outcomes that we don't necessarily see on the horizon.
Thank you. Well, all the nutrients that we can get from fish, we can get from plants. So for example, the omega-3, we can get them from flaxseed. We can get them from chia seeds. We can get them from certain nuts. So yeah, fishes have a lot of good nutrients, but so do plants. So we can get all of those. And about the food going bad, there's so many diseases linked to animal foods. Mad cow, swine flu, etc. So if we want to be safe, then let's stop eating animals. Now, one way to do that is the gentleman in the back in the green shirt, Tek Shin, raise your hand. He's from Kampong Senang, an NGO that promotes Green and Healthy Monday. So in other words, just one day a week. So just start with that. You don't have to go 100% plant-based. Just start. So maybe you give up beef, you give up pork, you just have marine animals for a while, and then gradually you can move from there. Oh yeah, can I just answer about killing vegetables, killing plants? Okay? Because yeah, I think maybe plants do have some kind of consciousness, but clearly it's not the same as animals. A plant and an animal, different, okay? But it's like the quote I repeated from Dr. Martin Luther King. The course of history is, the arc of history is long and jagged, but bends toward justice. Right now, we're working on being kind to animals. Maybe 50 years from now, we can stop eating plants too. Because the same technology, the cellular technology I mentioned, they just take one cell, they grow a cow. Okay, we can take one cell and grow broccoli. Okay, we don't have to kill any broccolis.
One last one, and then I think I have to wrap up the formal bit.
I thought to answer the previous question, but also this one about the meat consumption, because at least for myself, the last few years, I have been cutting down on meat. I think the part besides the value system changing and knowing so much that I feel that I needed to do something in line with what I say, it helps also to know that, there are friends who love food, and we go to, somebody's house, or you go to some restaurant and you really enjoy the quiz or some meal, and you actually totally forget that it has no meat in it. The first time when I realized that, I was like, oh my god, how did they create such an awesome meal without meat? It was like a bit mind-blowing for me. And then when we went to some other places, they were creating things like rainbow salad, etc., because they were like, if you eat things that is the colors of the rainbow, you have pretty much all the different types of diversity in nutrients that you need, and it's actually very good for your health. It's really rediscovering food, and to me, it's like if I have my makan kakis to go check out different places to makan, and it's so awesome. That's pretty much a very awesome way to change your diet. The part about food going expired, actually my partner has been eating expired food for the longest time, and he was eating this curry that he rescued from the beach. I haven't gotten there yet. But I'm part of the vegan community, and there's so many of us in Foodscape because we care about food. We also do food rescue, etc. And some of the food that we rescue, it includes sushi, bread, whatever you can think about that is maybe way past expiry, but it's totally good. And how do you know? You trust your gut, your instinct. Does that taste right? Does it smell right? Does it look right? And if it totally looks like, it's meant for the bin or it's meant for the compost, then you do it, But at some point, you have to trust your own gut experience that, hey, this is okay. And if the chocolate looks okay, tastes okay, you don't have a stomach ache, that's fine. So that's also some of the learnings that I have in the last few months, and rescuing food on a regular basis, seeing what gets thrown out. It really helps a lot in really understanding, what's this? Can we eat it? Can somebody else eat it? What can we do with this?
Just add.
No, sorry, don't. So thank you all so much for coming and for your wonderful questions. I know that there were many that we didn't get to. So I'd like to encourage you to please interact with our panel members afterwards and have a conversation. I'm sure most of them will be here for a bit longer. So thank you so much for coming. I wish you all a very happy International Day of the Tropics tomorrow. Enjoy the fact that this is where we live in the tropics, and that we have a really unique opportunity to do some great things locally in our own homes about food sustainability, but be aware, talk to other people about what's happening in a global perspective as well.
Can I just one last word? Because we do not give the wrong image, wrong message, We have been saying that expired food you can eat, but not all expired food. You have to be very careful. Like for example, bread. Because when you say you can eat it, it's because it's completely sealed, it's completely sterilized. Then you can keep for long, or in the freezer. But bread living outside is not completely sterilized. So when you say expired, you must be careful, because sometimes before it expires, you see more growing on the bread. So we don't want to send the wrong message that all expired food can be eaten. All right. Thank you.
Be safe, everybody.